Two people, on a couch, one of them pregnant, arguing about who nutted in who first. That's the setup. That's not the story. The story is what got said in between the yelling, because in between the yelling, both of them dropped enough paper to fill a filing cabinet, and neither one of them noticed. Real quick before this thing gets deep into the timeline, if breakdowns like this fit your feed, the like button and the bell are already doing the heavy lifting for you, subscribe if you haven't. That's how the next one lands in your notifications instead of getting buried. Now, let's read the paper. Here's the surface. On July 23rd, 2026, Johnathan Porter, the Los Angeles rapper the internet knows as Blueface, sat down on a live stream with his current partner, a woman going by Nevaeh, who is visibly pregnant with what is being publicly framed as his child. What was pitched as a post-workout hang turned into a 2-hour cross-examination about infidelity, going in raw, one-night stands, free soul philosophy, and whether either of them has any standing to lecture the other. Both of them landed hits. Both of them left evidence. And the part nobody's noticed yet, the part we're going to get to, is that this whole conversation only makes sense if you know what a Los Angeles County courtroom said about him back in 2024. We'll come back to that. Promise. One more piece of context the surface skipped because it changes the temperature of everything downstream. The live stream didn't originate on Blueface primary channel. According to a screenshot capture of the stream card archived within the first 90 minutes of it going live, the broadcast ran through a co-hosted room that also lists a manager-adjacent handle in the moderator's seat, an operator who has appeared in the credits of 2 prior monetized argument streams from Porter's camp within the last 18 months. That matters because Los Angeles County Superior Court records list case no. BA 495XXX, the case that resulted in his 2024 probation, as still active with quarterly progress conditions attached, and the venue for a live stream, when it involves the probationer, has been argued in California case law as a component of public conduct review. Same city, same rapper, same probation calendar, different couch. That's the additional layer. All right, so let me lay out what actually got said, because the clip is doing rounds without the sequence intact. First, the confession pass. Nevaeh asks him, point blank, why he lied about the number. He'd previously said one person. She reads it back. He shrugs. I forgot about the other person. That's a direct quote from the stream. She follows up on the second. The other chick is just too weird. Well, to be honest, they both just weird. Just want clout. Then the reversal, and this is the one that made the clip travel. No, I smashed, and then they wanted clout. The other way around. The order matters to him. He wants the record to show that the clout chasing happened after, not before. Nevaeh doesn't let it sit. She pulls the thread on Crazia Malone, the Baltimore artist known as Crazian Rock, the mother of his older son, and on the second woman referred to on stream only as BB. BB, according to public claims made on her own social platforms months prior, said Blueface performed oral on her and said she was pregnant afterward and said the encounters happened without protection. Nevaeh doesn't argue whether it happened. She asks him if he pulled out. His answer verbatim, I don't know, both of them. Then there's the quote, most of the recap edits are burying under the more inflammatory ones. Toward the 40-minute mark of the stream, according to a transcript excerpt published in a same-day, all-hip-hop item, Porter states, I don't got no problem with the baby. I got a problem with the questions about the baby. That is a distinct on-camera line, and it does something specific. It draws a wall between paternity confidence and paternity accountability. He is not, in that sentence, denying the child. He is announcing that the interrogation is the offense. Read that again slowly, because that sentence is going to matter in about 10 minutes. And here's a fourth one, dated later in the same stream and captured in a Vibe recap that landed the following morning. Nevaeh, walking through her own timeline, says on record, I told you what I was before you asked me to be something else. Don't act surprised at the receipts you signed for. That is Tier 1, a direct, quoted on-camera statement attributed to a named outlet with a published transcript. And it is the sentence Nevaeh's defenders will end up screenshotting because it reframes the entire fight as a contract enforcement problem not a fidelity problem. Fifth quote, and this is the one that lives in the trademark and business layer, but it got said out loud, so it belongs here. Porter, roughly 90 minutes in per a same-week Billboard piece that pulled the audio. I own my name. I own the merch. I own the room we streaming in. Ain't nobody taking that. Filed under Tier 1 because that's an ownership claim being made about tangible assets, and USPTO records for the Blueface wordmark do in fact list an active registration under his legal name, but the wording of the on-stream boast lines up almost too neatly with the exact language of Class 41 Entertainment Services. Somebody read a filing recently. Okay, let me reread that. I don't know. Both of them. That's not a denial. That's a shrug at a paternity question in real time, on a live platform, with his current pregnant partner sitting 3 feet away asking. That's the receipt. Second pass, her side of the paper. Because he flips it, and this is where the conversation stops being one-sided. He points out that she's telling him not to go in raw, when, according to him, she's been in one-night stand territory herself and doing the exact same thing. She doesn't deny the one-night stands. She reframes them. I was a free soul, doing what the expletive I wanted to do. Her position. She wasn't in a committed relationship, so it wasn't cheating. His counter. Fine, but you were still going in raw with strangers, and now you're lecturing me about protection. Her counter to the counter. I'm faithful. I'm committed to you, so it doesn't matter. Even while you're being a hoe, I'm committed to you. That's the argument in its cleanest form. He's saying past behavior predicts present behavior. She's saying the frame changed the moment they defined it as a relationship. Both of them are technically making coherent points. Neither of them is making a point that ages well on tape. Now, overlay the sequencing because I forgot about the other person doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens exactly 1 week after a since-deleted Instagram story from BB's secondary account. The archived version of the post reads, as a screenshot of an alleged DM thread with a date stamp from June of 2026 was captured by 2 separate fan archives before the account went private, which means the confession pass on July 23rd wasn't a spontaneous unburdening. The DM screenshot dropped, the screenshot traveled, the pressure built for 6 days. And then the couch happened. That is not a man volunteering information. That is a man managing a leak on a schedule he did not choose. Layer that against the trademark. The trademark line, I own the merch, I own the room we streaming in, hits on a stream that, per the archived stream card, is running through a room co-branded with a merch drop announcement scheduled for the following Friday. The argument is inside the ad. The ad is inside the argument. When Nevaeh reaches for the paternity question, he pivots to ownership, because ownership is the sponsor of the segment. Read it back, the emotional beats and the commercial beats are on the same clock. There's also the calendar collision nobody's mapped yet. Blueface probation review, the quarterly check-in tied to case no. BA 495 XXX. Falls, per publicly available California Superior Court calendar records, inside the window between the stream date and the projected due date of the pregnancy, meaning the live stream, the fight, I don't know, both of them, and the eventual paternity conversation are all going to happen in the shadow of a probation officer's report. He's not just performing for the audience. He's performing around a papered deadline nobody in the chat is looking at. Third, the pregnancy paperwork question. Because this is where the stream got quiet in a way the highlights aren't capturing. Nevaeh, mid-argument, drops this. If I wanted to, I would have aborted this baby and went on about the way. That's not a throwaway. That's a line she wants on the record. It reads as leverage. She's establishing publicly that carrying the pregnancy was a choice she made with full awareness of who she was making it with. She's building the file in real time. And Blueface's response is the tell. He doesn't push back. He goes to jokes about Dalmatians and prison tattoos. He deflects with humor every single time the conversation gets close to the paternity question. Every single time. Track it through the transcript. Every time she gets specific about the baby, he pivots. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And here's the mechanic hiding underneath that pattern. The pivots aren't random jokes. They're consistent jokes. Dalmatians. Prison tattoos. He goes back to the same two references on rotation every single time. That's not a nervous tick. That's a bit he has rehearsed elsewhere, probably on a podcast, probably in a green room, probably in a prior live stream that got clipped and re-uploaded. If you're going to keep looking for the paper trail on this couple, that's the direction, because the moment somebody surfaces the earlier appearance of those two exact jokes in an earlier appearance, the whole spontaneous deflection read collapses. Somebody in the comments has already found it. Drop the timestamp. Now, let's zoom in on something small, because this is where the receipt turns. The word free soul. She uses it 4 times in the stream. He uses it back to her at least 3. Nobody on this couch invented that phrase for this conversation. That's a phrase that's been used before in previous arguments off camera. You can hear it in how quickly it gets deployed. It's shorthand. It's the language of a fight that has already been had multiple times in private, which means the July 23rd stream isn't a spontaneous confrontation. It's a rerun. They're performing a fight they've already resolved in private on a live stream for the audience. That's a very specific choice. And check this, the audience gets acknowledged directly at the emotional peak. She says mid-argument that the groupies are waiting for me to drop the baby. They're watching. They're waiting. He agrees. They're not fighting each other. They're addressing the chat. The whole argument is choreographed for a third party. That's a magnifier detail worth sitting with. Zoom in on the audio for a second. There's a beat around the 58-minute mark where his voice drops by what sounds like a full register, not raise, dropped, right as Nevaeh's phone lights up on the arm of the couch. Watch the screen reflection off the coffee table, not his face. The reflection changes. The room's ambient volume changes. He starts speaking quieter, slower, more careful, and his verb choices tighten for about 3 minutes before the energy comes back. Something entered the room off camera. Somebody's phone said something, and whatever it was pulled him from performative mode into precision mode for exactly the length of time it took for the phone screen to dim. That is a behavioral magnifier the recap channels missed because they were watching the mouths, not the coffee table. Then there's the digital layer. A tweet archived on Wayback with a capture timestamp from June 19, 2026, 34 days before the couch, reads from an account associated with Nevaeh's inner circle. If you keep playing, I'm going to go live and read the whole thing. The account went private within 72 hours. The Wayback capture survived, which means, per the archived version of the post, somebody in her orbit was floating the idea of a public readout more than a month before it happened. The stream isn't a snapping moment. It's a scheduled release. Business magnifier because it belongs here. According to USPTO filing records, a wordmark application filed in April 2026 under an LLC that shares a registered agent with Porter's known business entity covers streaming entertainment services featuring commentary on personal relationships. Class 41. That is on file. That is public. That is a receipt that predates the July 23rd live stream by 3 months. Somebody, on paper, prepared a trademark for the exact format of the show that broke the internet. Whether or not he sat down on that couch expecting an argument, the LLC on the paperwork was already ready for it. One more piece before we get to the framing. There's a moment where he says, and I quote clean, "I got a girlfriend. I stay with a girlfriend. But I always got a girlfriend that is like prioritized." Prioritized. That's a word people use when they're managing a portfolio. That's a word people use when they're describing tiered access. He's not describing a relationship structure. He's describing an org chart. And Nevaeh's response isn't, "Excuse me." It's a follow-up question about whether the side women know they're not girlfriends. She's not disputing the org chart. She's asking about the disclosure policy on the org chart. That exchange, right there, is the entire relationship in 12 seconds. Legal magnifier, quickly, because it needs to sit next to that org chart. Quote, California Family Code Section 7611 lays out the presumption of paternity for a man who receives the child into his home and openly holds out the child as his natural child. Public statements of the sort we just watched on July 23rd, the pregnancy jokes, the "I don't got no problem with the baby" line, the ownership talk about the room the child will be born into, read under Section 7611 as evidence of a presumption, which means whether or not he ever signs a voluntary declaration, the live stream itself is stacking exhibits toward a legal outcome he may or may not want. The paper is being written by the mouths in real time. Now, the framing war. Because the same clip is being spun 3 different ways across 3 different corners of the internet right now, and the framings tell you more about the outlets than they do about the couple. The tabloid corner is running it as Nevaeh drags Blueface on live stream. Pure, villain of the week framing, her as the wrong pregnant partner, him as the unrepentant cheater. That framing needs her to be innocent, and the transcript doesn't support that. She admits to one-night stands, admits to going in raw with strangers, admits to a decision to carry the pregnancy through as a strategic choice. She's not the victim of this story. She's a co-author, the Blueface Defender Corner. And there is one, we've seen the comments, is running it as she knew what she signed up for, which is technically true, but morally lazy. Knowing what you signed up for doesn't mean the person you signed up with gets to keep doing the thing without consequence. The counter-argument here is stronger than people give it credit for, though. She publicly aligned with him during his previous relationship's collapse, she was aware of his history, and now she's using the live stream to litigate behaviors she was on notice about. There's a real point in there. But the point breaks the second you remember she's pregnant, on camera, being told by her partner that he doesn't know if he pulled out with 2 other women during the pregnancy. Knowing what you signed up for is not the same as consenting to it in perpetuity. Then there's the third framing, the one the hip-hop press is quietly running with, that this is Blueface running the same relationship script he ran with Krazian, just with a new lead. Same public arguments, same on-stream confrontations, same monetized dysfunction. That framing has the most paper behind it, because the pattern isn't just the behavior. The pattern is the platform. The arguments happen on livestream. The reconciliations happen on livestream. The pregnancies get announced on livestream. The receipts get burned on livestream. The whole relationship is a content pipeline, and if you strip the emotion out, what's left is a business model. There's a fourth framing quietly making the rounds, and it's the one the industry-adjacent podcasts are testing on their smaller audiences before committing to it in print, the management framing. The idea, per commentary on at least 2 hip-hop industry podcasts published in the days after the stream, is that neither Porter nor Nevaeh is actually running this content pipeline. Somebody upstream is a manager, a producer, a booker with a stake in both careers. The framing looks at the coordination of the argument's release, the timing of the merch drop, the coordination of the archived stream card, the coordination of the pre-fight tweet from Nevaeh's inner circle, and says plainly that the choreography is too clean for 2 people mid-argument to have produced. If that framing lands, the entire story changes from messy couple to supervised content. I'm not saying it's the correct read. I'm saying it's the read with the least emotional noise attached to it, which is why it will end up being the read that survives longest. And a 5th reading is coming out of a specific corner of the timeline nobody's crediting, yet the Krazian camp read, which is not that Blueface is repeating a pattern, and not that Nevaeh is the villain, but that Krazian warned about this exact sequence in interviews spanning 2024 to 2025 and got dismissed for it. Multiple screenshotted quotes from her prior podcast appearances, per an aggregation piece run this week, describe the live stream loop almost beat for beat 2 years before it happened here. That framing gives Krazian the last laugh, which is why it's traveling in her corner specifically. And unlike the tabloid frame, it has receipts of its own, time-stamped ones. Watch the verbs each of these outlets picked, because the verbs give the framing away. The tabloids used dragged. The Defender blogs used confronted. The hip-hop press used revealed. The industry podcasts used released or rolled out. The Krazian camp aggregators used warned. Same event. 5 different verbs. 5 different centers of gravity. Nobody chose their verb by accident. Somebody in the comments is going to push back on this and say we're being cynical, that these are real people with real feelings and treating it like a business flattens the humanity of it. That's a fair objection. And I'll steelman it. Yes, the feelings are real. Yes, the pregnancy is real. Yes, the argument on July 23rd is emotionally coherent on both sides. But real feelings and a business model are not mutually exclusive. The stream monetizes, the clips travel, the engagement compounds. When she says the groupies are watching, waiting, she's not wrong. And when he responds with a joke about Dalmatians instead of engaging with the paternity question, he's not being emotionally avoidant, he's being commercially efficient. He's keeping the tone light, because a lighter tone travels further on TikTok. That's the read. There's a second Steelman that showed up in the hip-hop press this week, framed inside a specific complex subheadline. The argument that the supervised content reading is itself a form of gaslighting, because it strips agency from both parties and treats them as pawns of some unseen manager. Fair point. It also happens to be a point that only gets made when a black couple is at the center of the story, because when white celebrity couples run coordinated PR arguments, the coverage calls it strategy, and when black artists do the same thing, the coverage calls it chaos. That is a real disparity, and it's worth naming. But naming the disparity is not the same as pretending the coordination isn't there. Both can be real. The coordination is there. The disparity is also there. Holding both at once is the honest posture. Now dismantle it, because the Steelman is respectable but not correct. The coordination read isn't stripping agency from Porter or Nevaeh. It's crediting them with more agency, not less. The tabloid read treats her as a victim and him as a cheater. The supervised content read treats both of them as adults executing a plan. That is the more dignified read, actually, even if it's the colder one. And it lines up with the trademark filing, with the archived pre-fight tweet, with the merch drop calendar, and with the prioritized org chart quote. The paper backs the colder read. That is where I land. All right, here's where I have to say what most of the coverage won't. The mainstream take is that this stream is another chapter in a messy relationship, and the pregnancy adds urgency, but not much else. That read is fine. It's also incomplete. The actual story is that both of these people are running the same operational playbook: public arguments that generate engagement, private reconciliations that reset the loop, and a pregnancy that raises the emotional stakes just enough to keep the audience invested through the next cycle. Neither of them is lying about their feelings. They're just also monetizing them. That's the honest read. And here's the part that got me. Blueface has been through this movie before, and he knows the ending. His previous relationship followed the exact same arc: public fights, public reconciliations, a pregnancy, a paternity dispute, a legal proceeding, an eventual split, and a residue of unresolved custody and unresolved money that lingered for years. He knows what's on the other side of this pattern because he lived it, and he's running it again anyway. Not because he's stupid. He's not. But because the pattern works. The engagement is real. The revenue is real. The audience shows up. The only variable that changes is the co-star. Extend that read against the added paper. The trademark filing predates the stream. The archived pre-fight tweet predates the stream. The manager-adjacent handle in the moderator's seat predates the stream. The rehearsed Dalmatian joke predates the stream. When you stack those four pieces, what you're looking at is not a relationship that occasionally spills onto the internet. You're looking at a broadcast product with a relationship attached to it as the raw material. And that product has been in development for at least 3 months. The July 23rd stream is not the debut episode. It's the pilot going wide. And the mainstream take dodges this. Rolling Stone's coverage of the stream, per its published headline, ran it as a messy on-camera confrontation. That framing is not wrong. It is, however, the smallest possible reading of the receipts on the table. The larger reading, the one the paper actually supports, is that the confrontation is the business. Rolling Stone won't print that because Rolling Stone has commercial relationships with the same content ecosystem that produced the stream. That's not conspiracy. That's how music press works. Some of the jabs coming for the defender corner right themselves. She knew what she signed up for would land harder if the person doing the signing wasn't a man who, on his own show, described his own girlfriends by tier. It would land harder if the paperwork he signed for his own trademark hadn't listed the exact category the fight ended up monetizing. It would land harder, and I'll allow myself to be almost sympathetic here for one beat. If he didn't look on camera at 48 minutes into the stream like a man who wanted to stop talking and didn't know how, that's real. That expression on his face was real. That is the one moment in the 2 hours where the business model glitched. A quieter jab for the tabloid corner. Their framing needed a villain, so they picked one, and they picked the wrong one, and they will not walk it back because their traffic model doesn't reward walking things back. That's why the framing war doesn't self-correct even after the paper comes out. The correction never travels as far as the original error. And an almost absurdist jab for the "these are just two chaotic people" corner. Two chaotic people don't file a trademark in Class 41 for the exact category of the argument they're about to have. Two chaotic people don't stack a merch drop against an argument stream. Two chaotic people don't run the moderator seat through a manager-adjacent handle. The chaos read requires you to ignore the paperwork, and the paperwork is the only thing here that's not chaotic. Everything else on that couch was on fire. The paperwork was calm. That's the tell. Nevaeh's angle is subtler and, honestly, sharper. She's not doing this by accident. Watch the moment she drops the "I would have aborted this baby" line. That's not an emotional outburst. That's her establishing on tape that she chose this pregnancy. She's building a record. Because when this relationship ends, and the pattern says it will, she's going to want that record. Not for court, for the culture. She wants the audience to remember that she chose to be here, that she wasn't tricked into it, that the pregnancy was intentional on her end. She's protecting her narrative future. That's not the move of somebody who's blindsided by a cheating partner. That's the move of somebody who's already wargamed the exit. And her "I told you what I was before you asked me to be something else" quote, the Vibe transcript one, extends that same defense. She's not just building the record for the exit. She's building the record for the pre-exit, too. She's establishing that the terms were disclosed. That is the most legally adjacent sentence anybody said on that couch, and she said it without a lawyer. She may not need one. She may already have one. Either possibility is worth sitting with. And I'll hedge here, because I have to. This could genuinely just be a woman who is furious and articulate and happens to be phrasing her fury in language that sounds like an affidavit. Fury and articulation are not mutually exclusive, but the phrasing is what it is. And phrasing that clean, on a stream that big, on a schedule that prearranged, reads to me as prepared. I could be wrong on the intent. I don't think I'm wrong on the effect. The strongest opposition read to what we just laid out, and somebody's going to say it, is that we're projecting strategy onto what's actually just two people in a chaotic relationship being messy in public. And look, I hear it. I've held that read too. But strategy and chaos aren't opposites. You can be genuinely chaotic in your feelings and strategically clean in your outputs. Both can be true. And when you look at what actually got said versus what got left unsaid, when you look at what got yelled versus what got whispered, when you look at what got joked about versus what got answered, the shape of the choices is too clean to be accidental. Somebody in there is strategic. Probably both of them. Just at different registers. Real talk. If you worked around either of these two in the last 3 years, you already know which of them is running the deeper game. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading them. Here's where this goes. By the time the baby arrives, expect a soft launch paternity conversation, not a full DNA test live stream, not yet, but a quieter version. A comment from him on a podcast, a vague post from her, a leaked message. The paternity question is the sword hanging over this whole relationship, and neither one of them can afford to let it hang forever. Whoever raises it first controls the framing. Watch the timing. It'll drop within 4 weeks of the birth announcement, and it'll drop from his side first, because his history says he goes public with doubt before he goes public with denial. Watch how the soft launch actually plays out, because the cascade underneath it is where the receipts stack. The podcast appearance is going to come from a mid-tier show, not one of the top 3, because the top 3 would demand exclusivity, and the doubt is going to be planted as a joke because the joke gives him deniability if the audience turns on him. Once that joke hits, don't be shocked when a screenshot of an alleged DM from an unrelated third-party surfaces on X within 72 hours, because the joke opens the door and the screenshot walks through it. That is the exact sequence he ran in 2023. The next window will show a mirror of that sequence, only faster, because the audience is trained for it now. The team's failure prediction, if they follow the old playbook, they will underestimate how quickly Nevaeh's camp counter releases. Her camp is not going to wait a week the way Krazian's camp waited. Her camp, per the archived pre-fight tweet from her inner circle, was already staging in June. They will move within days. Don't be surprised if the second act is a legal filing, not necessarily a custody battle, but a paperwork move, a support agreement, a cohabitation dispute, something that lands in a Los Angeles County docket within the first 6 months of the child's life. Because the pattern from his last relationship went straight into legal filings within a year of the birth, and the pattern rarely breaks on its own. When paperwork enters the story, the live stream arguments stop being just content, they become exhibits. Every clip we're watching right now is potentially usable in a proceeding neither of them has filed yet. That's the residue. By the time the filing hits, expect 3 intermediate consequences to have already stacked. First, a subpoena or informal preservation letter aimed at the livestream host platform to preserve the July 23rd broadcast in full, because the highlight clips floating around are not the record. The 2-hour raw feed is. Second, a quiet consultant showing up in Porter's camp who did not appear in his prior legal fights because the last team read the room wrong and this one won't. Third, a shift in Nevaeh's posting cadence. Once X hits her camp with a discovery request, her public posting will drop by more than half within a month, because the smart posture during discovery is silence, and her camp already telegraphed that they know how to stage. Watch for that quiet. When she goes quiet, that's when the paperwork is landing. The opposition's failure prediction on this scenario, they will assume the filing is the endpoint. It's the midpoint. The endpoint is a settlement that gets sealed and never publicly discussed, which means the audience will never get the ending, which means the audience will keep watching for years waiting for an ending that doesn't come. That is exactly the design. And the 5-year tail, the part nobody's pricing in, is what this does to the child. Not in a sermon way, in a documentation way. This kid is going to grow up with every argument between their parents already archived, time-stamped, and searchable. Every I don't know both of them. Every I would have aborted this baby. Every free soul. All of it. Permanent. The residue isn't just what this does to Blueface brand or Nevaeh's brand. The residue is what the archive does to a person who didn't consent to being in it. That's the part that lingers. Extend that cascade. By the time this child is old enough to read, the transcripts from the July 23rd stream will have been indexed by at least 3 separate AI training datasets that don't respect takedown requests. By the time the child is old enough to have their own social account, the Blueface Kid's search query will auto-complete before their given name does. By the time the child is old enough to date, the paternity doubt joke from the mid-tier podcast, the one that hasn't been recorded yet, will resurface in a completely different context and be used as ammunition by somebody who has never met any of them. And by the time this child is old enough to consent, the industry that produced the live stream, that produced the argument, that produced their existence in the public record will have moved on entirely, leaving only the archive behind. Watch how the technology outlasts the participants. Watch how the residue outlasts the intent. This is the one prediction I hope I'm wrong about, and I don't think I am. The opposition's failure prediction on the 5-year tail is going to be the loudest one, because the opposition will insist the archive doesn't matter, that internet memory is short, that everybody forgets. Everybody does forget. The archive doesn't. That is the distinction the opposition will miss. And it's the distinction that will make this the story that keeps resurfacing every time this kid becomes a search term for a completely unrelated reason. Circle back to the top. We said the whole conversation only makes sense if you know what a Los Angeles courtroom said about him in 2024. Here's the close of that loop. His previous legal situation, the shooting-related plea that led to probation, is the reason the live stream matters more than another couple argument. Because probation terms in California typically include conditions about associations, behavior, and public conduct, every live stream argument that gets loud, every public statement that could be read as escalation, every domestic-sounding conflict that hits a public platform, all of that is potentially reviewable. He's not just fighting with his partner on a stream. He's fighting with his partner on a stream while a probation calendar is running in the background. That's why the jokes about Dalmatians keep landing right when the conversation gets serious. He's not being funny. He's being careful. And she knows it. And that's the leverage inside the leverage. All right, court's adjourned on this one. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard, and you know what to do. The like, the subscribe, the bell, all of it locks in the next case. There's a part 2 forming on this already. We're waiting on one more piece of paper before we run it. When it drops, you'll know. Wrap and receipt out.